Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Renovation and Outdoor Living Show. My name's Rawdon Christie. This is episode 25, and it is June the 30th. There you go, the last day of the first 6 months of the year. We're halfway through, halfway to the end of the year, 184 days to go to be precise. 30th of June, 1990, was it? No, I'm not sure, when the East and West Germany merged their economies. Anyway, this isn't a history lesson. This is all about the outdoors and the indoors and making your lives and your living areas look a great deal better. So today, the theme is sloped sites and specifically retaining walls. And Jane has just tuned in and said hi. So do leave your comments and say hi if you want to. Jane Sly has just said hi. So first, a recap of Friday. Our theme on Friday was electrical safety. And we spoke to Robert Knight from Schneider Electric, and he told us about the latest must-have for your electrical safety, and this is called the Arc Fault Detection Device, or the AFDD. So it goes one step. Hi, Jessica, nice to see you. It goes one step further than the RCDs. You know, we all have those in our modern switchboard. The RCD breaking the circuit, but the AFDD, or the Arc Fault Detection Device, they detect any arc. Any spark as such in the system, and then they're cut out. So even safer than the RCDs. Then we spoke to Carolyn Ziegler, who joined us from her base at Bondi Junction in Australia, the co-founder of Dream Baby, which is this massive baby and child safety device company. She talked to us all about they're in 100-odd countries, all things safety for people with youngsters in the home. And in particular, she was telling us about how to keep them safe and just what you should think about and consider when you're renovating or building around the house, and the number of potential dangers that could present with tiny ones around the place. So basically, she said, don't leave nail guns lying around. Or actually, the real advice she was, keep children behind a suitable barrier when there is any work going on. A barrier like the one which we're going to be giving away, not today, but very soon. So she gave us this, this gate. Here you go. And there's a ramp as well with this. This is from Dream Baby. It's $150 worth. So if you've got tiny ones or pets, or you just like gates, maybe you've got a husband who can't open them, whatever it is, then jump in and see if you can win that. To enter, just comment on why you need this prize pack from Dream Baby. Okay, we want to know what your situation is and why you think you might need it. So let's get to today's theme: sloped sites. Now, Nicola Vague, familiar name for us now on the Renovation and Outdoor Living Show. We've spoken to Nicola about 2 or 3 things in the past. Now, she's a landscape architect who now runs Zones Landscaping in Tauranga. And I noted, actually, Nicola, I noticed that you've recently won a silver for Landscape of the Year. This was in the Zones People's Choice Awards, and a gold for Garden of the Year. So congratulations for that. However, we want to get straight to the point on retainer walls, because this, you know, if you're saying to a client, okay, you're going to need a retainer wall down here if you want to level this off or you want to make this safe, that's going to bring a shiver down the spine, because we know you don't get to see a lot for what is often a lot of money. So why do we build them? When do we need them?
Yeah, retaining walls, I think, are a really useful element in the garden. And in particular, one of the biggest things they do is they help us create a usable space. So often you'll have a site which is a sloped lawn, and to all intents and purposes, it's hard to mow, hard to look after. And by leveling it out using retaining, you can actually create a usable garden. Other things retaining walls are useful for is supporting other structures. Say you're putting in a swimming pool and it needs to be supported, retaining can help do that. And it can also stop erosion. So they have a number of uses. Some of them a lot more engineered than others. And sometimes it's just to create a nice, raised planting area, because a raised planter is in effect a retaining wall as well.
Yeah, as we can see in that picture there. So because I had immediately assumed we're talking about a massive big retainer down the side of the property to flatten a site off or to completely change the landscaping. However, you've just pointed out actually you can use it to create very simple features as well. So therefore, how much background work needs to go into the average project then? I mean, do you need to get to various consents? Because as you say, if you're holding back a lot of earth, like in this sort of picture here, I imagine there's quite a lot of work before you start building this.
Sure. And yeah, so there are a few guidelines around whether you need consent. And so the things that can be triggered is you may need a building consent or a resource consent for a retaining wall. So if I start with building consents, Typically, anything over 1 metre high will require building consent regardless of where it is. Sorry, over 1.5 metres.
Right.
That's 1.5 metres. And with that, you also need structural engineering. And that's because once you get to a wall of that height, there is a lot of pressure put on that wall from the soil behind, but even more so, with that soil comes the water. And it's really the pressure of the water against a vertical faced wall. So anything over 1.5, automatically building consent and engineering design. That can also be influenced. Building consent is also required where you have a surcharge on your wall. So say you have your wall next to an area with a driveway, so it's supporting a driveway. As soon as you have that situation, you need engineering design and building consent. So your wall might only be 0.5 metre high, but you certainly need engineering and building consent for that if it's supporting something like a driveway. Things that can also trigger building consent is if your wall is going to be close to a boundary, then, or on the boundary, you certainly will need neighbours' consent, but you may very well need building consent as well. So it's always good to check with those things. And then I also mentioned resource consent. So walls may very well trigger resource consent. Couple of reasons why: maybe the amount of soil you need to move to achieve that wall. Once you're over a certain cubic metre rate, you will need resource consent. If your wall is within a highly visual area, say it's next to the coast and you're in a significant catchment for its visual amenity or landscape amenity, that will trigger a resource consent, and you would need to go down the process of dealing with that. You may also have things like council drains and stuff, which will impact on, if you needed to bridge a significant drain, then you will need council input, and building and may very well need resource consent as well. So there's costs associated with those. Yeah,
so it sounds expensive, and when resource consent comes in, probably a long process as well. So you're well off planning
Definitely.
it pretty early in your design in your rethink. Very quickly, if you're just reinstalling a different type of retaining,
like recladding,
you normally only need building consent. Do you have to get another building consent if you are you replacing, or do you have to replace like for like, or what's the situation there?
So you've got an existing retaining wall and you're just replacing it, basically. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. With something different? So I think it would depend on whether the wall had to have consent to start with. So if you were changing, if it was a structural wall and you were changing that, then I would err on the side of caution and get some advice around that, because if you're changing a structural wall, then you're changing its original design. So because
the reason why I'm asking is, I'm just looking at the pictures you've just seen. Obviously, the materials for retaining have got a great deal more exciting than just chucking in a whole row of, vertical logs.
Definitely.
Yep. So I'm sure there are a lot of people who are thinking about changing certain retaining when that's obvious in their backyards.
Yep. Yeah, and the image that you can see there shows a combination of materials. So you've got the idea of steel, which I think is a fantastic addition to create a contemporary retaining wall. I think there's a concrete wall in the background there. Both of those are quite, at the high end of cost. You can do precast concrete slab retaining walls. The first image we showed was a gabion wall, and those are fantastic as well. The mesh baskets filled with stones and stuff. And then you have timber walls. So there's a huge array of materials you can use to create retaining. But if you think with a timber wall, pretty much what you see out of the ground is what you see in the ground, and so that goes with cost as well. So if your wall's 1 metre high, it needs to be 1 metre in the ground as well.
I was going to ask about the gabion, but something like the gabion wall, though, is that just straight on the ground?
So they need to, what they do is they go slightly below the ground, and then they have a footing below them. So they'll have either a big, depending on the height. So the design of what happens underground changes a lot as soon as you get taller. So, but these ones, they typically either have a compacted base or a concrete footing underground to support that. But they are a very cost-effective option. And then, of course, behind any retaining wall, you'll need the drainage that to support that water movement. Yeah.
So the Gabion is a good cost option. You just mentioned that amazing looking steel. You said that's a pretty spendy sort of option. What about those drop-in concrete slabs?
Yeah, they're still not at the at the lower end, so they are one of the higher end options. Stone being the top of the range, but certainly some of the drop-in panels. If you're not having to do a huge structural wall, then companies like Hines do a great range of precast panels that you can install, and in very narrow areas as well, so they don't take up a huge amount of space.
And I'm sure there are companies and innovators looking at so many new different ideas for this, because as you say, it is a phenomenally costly, once you've had to do all the research and the consenting and the structural engineering, it is a very costly part of your project often. So any new
they can have a big,
sorry.
What was it? Sorry?
Any new innovations you've got your eye on that are coming?
Oh goodness, I'm a big fan of the Gabions. I love them. I think they're fantastic, and so combining those, I think people could get a little bit more, maybe combining the materials. I love looking at the corten next to a Gabion or timber in the Gabion. So I think just mixing it up a bit, because visually retaining walls are just as significant in your landscape as, say, a fence or any other structure. They can make a huge impact on the style of your property.
And that's exactly what we want to talk about next, because that's really interesting, Nicola. Thank you. That's a real, really practical guide to the basics of what you have to think about when you're putting these projects together. So really good to have a chat with you. And by the way, you've got strangers walking around in your garden outside. I know you've got people doing your garden up while you're sitting in this chat.
I have.
Yeah. We'll talk again soon. But thank you very much for that. Really good information. Really good information to use. No And the reason why it's a really good time now to introduce our next guest is because Nicola's just started talking about how much of a feature you can make your wall and how you can combine them. Design comes in now a lot of the time, rather than the old sort of logs stuck in the ground that I was describing. So it's a good time to probably talk about Thelma Mai, who again on the program, because Thelma, we've met her before on the show. She runs the Zones franchise here in Central Auckland. And Thelma's background is interior design. So Thelma, this gives you the creative flair. You know how to make things look amazing, like retaining walls. Is that right?
Yeah, it sounds like a very boring topic, but retaining walls are probably one of my best topics to talk about, because you can mix and match. And as Nicola was saying, it's all about the materials and how they're good to gel together, concrete and corten steel, or tiles and stone, anything. It's great.
And in that picture we just saw, you've made the wall look fabulous by basically hiding it behind plants.
So planting is very important when we do retaining walls, because it needs to be soften ugly and retaining walls that we don't have money to maybe redo them. So planting is one of the best solutions of hiding, retaining, or just soften the hardscape, because usually retaining walls is next to a deck. You get lots of steps and it's all hardscape. So to soften it up, use your planting selection. And this slide, very nice to have some sort of herbs and things that you use in the garden close to your kitchen and your outdoor entertaining areas. So keep that close so that you can use that all the time. And starting with a planting selection that giving bigger plants to the back so that you actually have levels to walk and talk to.
So that's about the functionality. By the way, Jessica says she loved that one. Plants look amazing. I don't know which one she was talking about. Probably the one before that. And then Jane said, "Wow, what an entrance!" So yeah, I mean, they're visual. Funnily enough, visually they're really powerful. And you just mentioned the like the herbs, because this is about functionality as well. Why not use what you're creating? And Nicola mentioned this as well.
Functionality is the most important thing, and things that people in the household wants to use. So why not have edible in your gardens? And so herbs and vegetables close to you, and everybody wants a lemon and lime tree for their gin and tonics. So yeah, very important to have that. Also, for functionality of retaining walls is just to create level spaces so you can actually add value and use every square meter of your site. So by using retaining walls and sometimes use the steps on the side of your property, you can create bigger open spaces, level it out, and have functionality. If it's a leveled lawn, if it's a outdoor entertaining area, seating area, that was a fire pit, anything that you can work on, because the most important thing is use every square meter of your site. Doesn't matter how slopey it is.
That's really clever. And actually, fun enough, Jane's just written and said, oh, I like that one. I presume she's talking about the one we just saw in that beautiful round space. So it'd be nice in my ex-pool space, like a sunken garden. That is such a great idea. You could have, you would have a lot of fun with that, Thelma. If somebody gave you an empty pool and said, make this the the go-to space in the garden.
Yeah.
What about lighting? How important do you think that is? Because I noticed here we go. This is a good example. And that actually makes a feature of the wall.
Yes, lighting is so important, and I always say it's one of the most important things in a garden, lighting design. And why not use the retaining wall to actually uplift the structure of your retaining wall? It gives you light, it gives you the mood, and especially with the slope sites with steps and stairs and a walk path to a specific area, it just helps you to get from A to B without no slip, trips and falls.
So let's move to the planning scale. When you sit down and somebody presents you with it's a sloping section, it's from the 60s, no one's done anything with it. Do you sit down and say, do you in your mind see, I can see an aesthetic straight away just in the planning stage?
It's important to look at what your client wants first of all. So if you look at a slope site, go through the brief and see what they want. There's a couple of slides of one of my latest designs that we're busy with. And we are going to create, and it doesn't look that slopey on this specific slide, but it is extremely sloped site. And we're going to create 2 sets of retaining wall just to level it out and make it easier with nice steps to that bottom area. That will be a nice deck. We are going to take all the lawn out of that specifics and take everything away, because there's no ways that you can mow if you don't have a leveled area. And we are going to use this one side of the slope and actually have a slide for the kids into a sand pit and create a fun space for them. And their level lawn area will have artificial turf with the trampoline on the one side, and on the other side we're creating a putting green area. So it's all about the kids use the slope, have a huge big entertaining decking area, but also for them to supervise their children while they're outside. So very functional space, and just create amazing planting on both sides. Will be irrigated, a sprinkler system, so that and garden boxes so they can walk around to get to those areas. That's still functional, and it will be edible.
It's unbelievable. But okay, this is a slightly I imagine this is a slightly more exotic version of the child. But isn't that interesting how slopes? Do you sometimes in your mind, when you see a sloping garden, is the first thing you say to your client, say, please, do you have children? Because we've got options galore here. All those ideas are so good for the kids, isn't it? Because kids love things, so that makes sense.
Yeah, so use your another thing for aesthetics obviously is the combination of color. Nicola mentioned the different materials. Always soften it with plants, and you can paint your retaining walls or even the steps. You can have, if it's timber, the riser can be black and the landing can be tiles. So that options of aesthetics is just, it's great to work with. And then the greenery of your plants, wow, it's a wow factor, isn't it?
And Thelma, that's a really interesting one we're looking at there, because this one, you've actually kept some of the slope, albeit you've retained it in a really clever way with the sort of concrete, with the rocks inlaid on the flat, just to sort of add to the slope. But that's a great example of sort of, actually, I'm not going to start trying to describe mixing up materials for aesthetic reasons, but it looks utterly incredible.
Just use your slope and work with it. I think it's so important. And then see how many level areas you can create for spaces that you require for spa or whatever.
Okay, quick question for you. If you go to a property for a consultation at the beginning, do you prefer it when you've got the slope coming down towards the back of the house where people are going to be living, or the slope going away from the back of the house down? Because it would completely change the way you'd plan it.
It's changed it totally. No, you just have to work with what you've got. I don't have a preference, but I do love structured gardens where you start small and you go up a level with a level lawn, and you can actually create bigger planting to the top. So that's probably my preference of having, like that image, for instance, is start from your outdoor entertaining area on a flat surface, small planting that you can use in your garden herbs, and as we mentioned, and then step up to your first level. And it depends on how slopey it is, how many levels you are going to have to get to your boundary fence.
Amazing, really interesting. So, by the way, Jane with the pool who wants to something, she's in Tauranga, so we'll put her in touch with Nicola.
Yeah,
you can go on a road trip and go and help out. Hey, Thelma, thank you so much. Really interesting stuff. Very cool, and I'm completely sold on the opportunities and the potential that retaining has now in the garden. I'm going to buy a place with a sloping section just for that reason. But really good to get that insight from you. And that is Thelma Mayer there from Central Auckland today, another of our zone's franchise owners. Now, very quickly, I'm going to get to our top 10 in a moment, but the winner of the Annie Sloan. This is the chalk paints, which you can put on any furniture, floor, cabinetry, ceiling, whatever, to refresh whatever you like. $300 worth of these chalk paints, and we're going to give them away now, and we are going to give them to the winner, Karen McDonald. Congratulations, Karen. Now, you told us that you'd love to repaint the furniture you're going to be using to access your storage loft. So I presume that means you've got a whole lot of junk up in the top, which is nice. And now you're going to paint it up and make it look even nicer. Absolutely brilliant. Well done. Right, today's top 10, Tuesday top 10. Well, it's the school holidays next week, which got me thinking, and I was meant to be going overseas myself. But of course, we can't, not from New Zealand, and I don't think anywhere in the world really can. So an overseas themed top 10 for you. The 10 most ridiculous complaints made by holidaymakers to their travel agents. Now, these came from Thomas Cook in the UK. Okay, so just tune in your mind to British folk, Spain, that sort of travel a lot of the time, because a couple of them are about Spain. The top 10 most ridiculous complaints made by holidaymakers to their travel agents. Number 10, of course, the beach was too sandy. Because if the beach was sandy, you would have to complain about it being too sandy, wouldn't you, if you were one of those sort of people? Number 9, we bought Ray-Ban sunglasses for only €5, that's about $10, from a street trader, only to find out they were fake. Complaint to the travel agent because somebody bought fake glasses. Number 8, no one told us there'd be fish in the sea. The children were startled. I would so love to have worked at Thomas Cook when someone came in and made that complaint to me. Number 7, it took us 9 hours to fly home from Jamaica to England. It only took the Americans 3 hours to get home. Number 6, I compared the size of our 1-bedroom apartment to our friend's 3-bedroom apartment. Ours was significantly smaller. Number 5, there were too many Spanish people. The receptionist spoke Spanish. The food was Spanish. Too many foreigners. I think that's a very common complaint from my ex-country folk back in the UK. Number 4, I was bitten by a mosquito. Nobody told us they could bite. Number 3, the Spanish shopkeepers were lazy. They closed in the afternoons. I often needed to buy things during siesta time. This should be banned. Yeah, take it to the Spanish government. They'll be sleeping. Number 2, the second most ridiculous complaints made by holidaymakers to their travel agents. On my holiday to Goa in India, I was disgusted to find that almost every restaurant served curry. I don't like spicy food at all. Good choice. And number one, I kid you not, number one complaint to a Thomas Cook agent in the UK. We booked an excursion to the water park, but no one told us we had to bring our swimming costumes and towels. I'm sure that didn't stop them, and I'm sure they were delighted to share the spa with at that particular water park. There you go, the top 10 most ridiculous complaints to travel agents in the UK. I'll think of another top 10 to bring you on Friday when we will see you and do it all again. Have a great week in the meantime. Bye-bye.